My name is Ziv and I am 60 years old. And the day my daughter told me I would get nothing from my late wife's $10 million estate was the day I realized that sometimes the people you love the most can become strangers. But what happened in that courtroom later changed everything. Not just the inheritance. The truth. The life we built. My wife Elena and I were not rich people when we met. In fact, when we got married, we barely had enough money to afford our tiny apartment. The wallpaper was peeling, the heater barely worked in winter, and our kitchen table had one leg shorter than the others. But we were happy. I worked long hours as a mechanic, while Elena spent evenings sketching jewelry designs in a small notebook she carried everywhere. One night I remember clearly. She showed me a sketch of a silver necklace. "What do you think?" she asked. I looked at it carefully. "It's beautiful," I said honestly. She smiled shyly. "Someday women around the world will wear my designs." I laughed and kissed her forehead. "I believe you." And the truth is, I really did. Years passed. Elena worked harder than anyone I had ever seen. She learned marketing, online sales, and branding. Slowly, her jewelry business started growing. Then it exploded. Celebrities began wearing her designs. Boutiques started calling. Orders flooded in from other countries. Before we knew it, the small kitchen table business had become a multi-million-dollar company. But success never changed her. She still cooked dinner every night and insisted we watch old romantic movies together. And together we raised our daughter Lena. Or at least that's what I believed. The little girl who loved her dad. When Lena was little, she was my entire world. Every evening when I came home from work, she would run across the living room and jump into my arms. "Daddy's home," she'd shout. Sometimes she helped Elena pack jewelry boxes. She wore fake plastic rings and said proudly, "I'm working in Mom's company." We laughed and told her she was already the boss. Back then life felt perfect. But children grow up. And sometimes they grow in directions you never expect. The man I never trusted. When Lena turned 25, she introduced us to a man named Victor. He was confident, well-dressed, smooth with his words. Elena liked him immediately. But something about him made me uncomfortable. At dinner, he didn't ask about Elena's health or our family history. He asked about the business. How much revenue does the company generate? How are the shares divided? Who inherits everything if something happens? I noticed how his eyes sharpened when money was mentioned. Elena dismissed my concerns. "You worry too much, Ziv," she said gently. Maybe she was right. Or maybe I simply saw what others didn't want to see. The diagnosis. 3 years ago our lives changed forever. Elena was diagnosed with cancer. The word alone felt like a hammer hitting my chest. At first we believed treatment would help, we stayed hopeful. But slowly, painfully, the disease began winning. The strong woman who once worked 16-hour days could barely walk across the room. I stayed with her every moment I could. I cooked for her. I drove her to every appointment. I held her hand during chemotherapy. But Lena and Victor rarely visited. And when they did, their conversations felt strange. One afternoon Lena sat beside Elena's hospital bed. "Mom," she said softly, "you should organize your will properly." Elena looked at her with tired eyes. "I already did." Victor leaned forward slightly. "And who manages the estate?" Elena smiled faintly. "You'll find out someday." At the time, I didn't think much of it. But looking back now, that moment meant everything. Her final words. The night Elena passed away, the hospital room was silent except for the sound of machines. I held her fragile hand. She looked at me with love that hadn't faded in 34 years. "Take care of yourself, Ziv," she whispered. "I will," I promised. Then she closed her eyes. And just like that, the love of my life was gone. The conversation that broke my heart. 2 weeks after the funeral, Lena came to my house with Victor. They didn't hug me. They didn't ask how I was feeling. Instead, Lena stood in the living room and said coldly, "Dad, we need to talk about Mom's money." Something about her tone made my stomach tighten. "What about it?" I asked quietly. Victor spoke before she could. "The estate is worth around $10 million. I nodded slowly. "And?" Lena crossed her arms. Well, you're not getting any of it. For a moment I thought I misunderstood. I'm sorry, what? Victor smiled slightly. The will leaves everything to Lena. My heart felt heavy. That doesn't sound like your mother. Lena shrugged. You didn't build Mom's business, she did. Those words hurt more than anything. Because Elena and I had built everything together. But suddenly I was being erased. The letter that started the fight. A week later I received an official letter from their lawyer. It confirmed their claim. According to the document they provided, Elena had left the entire estate to Lena. No mention of me. 34 years of marriage. Gone. Something didn't feel right. Elena and I had talked many times about our future. She always said the company would support both of us. So I hired a lawyer. And that decision changed everything. The hidden truth. During the investigation, my lawyer discovered something surprising. Elena had updated her will 6 months before she died. And the version Lena presented wasn't the final one. My lawyer smiled when he told me, Mr. Ziv, I believe your wife knew exactly what she was doing. The courtroom. Months later we were standing in court. Lena sat beside Victor, avoiding eye contact with me. Her lawyer confidently presented their document. Your Honor, the estate clearly belongs to my client. But my lawyer stood calmly. Your Honor, that is not the final will. The courtroom became quiet. He placed another document on the table. The verified final will of Elena Ziv. Lena's face turned pale. Victor whispered something angrily. The judge studied the paper carefully. Then he began reading. The truth revealed. According to the verified will, the judge said, 70% of the estate goes to her husband Ziv. 30% goes to her daughter Lena. Gasps filled the room. Victor jumped up. That's fake. But the judge shook his head. The document has been verified by the attorney who drafted it. Then came the most unexpected moment. Elena's final message. The lawyer stepped forward with an envelope. Mrs. Elena Ziv left a letter to be read if this will was ever disputed. The courtroom grew silent. He opened the envelope and read. My dear Ziv. If this letter is being read, it means someone tried to change the truth. You stood beside me through every struggle in life. The success of my business was never mine alone, it was ours. I know you never cared about the money. But I wanted to make sure you would always be safe. As for Lena, I hope she remembers one day that love matters more than wealth. Forever yours. Elena. By the time the letter ended, tears were running down my face. The judge's decision. The judge closed the case file. This court recognizes the final will of Elena Ziv. Then he looked at Lena. Greed destroys families faster than poverty ever could. The gavel struck. The case was over. After everything, I walked out of that courtroom with $7 million. But strangely, it didn't feel like a victory. Money cannot replace the woman I loved. And it cannot repair the relationship with the daughter I once carried on my shoulders. Lena hasn't spoken to me since that day. Maybe one day she will. Until then I live quietly. I donate part of Elena's fortune to cancer charities. And every Sunday morning, I still make pancakes. Just the way she used to. Moral of the story. Money reveals people's true character. Those who chase wealth may lose something far more valuable, family, love, and trust. Because in the end, the greatest inheritance is not money. It is the people who stood beside us when we had nothing.